When my uncle sent me that video, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. There they were, my parents and my brother Thomas, sitting around the old kitchen table in our family home in Phoenix, casually talking about me like I was nothing more than an inconvenient burden. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing the room in that familiar Arizona glow. It was the same kitchen where we'd once celebrated birthdays and holiday dinners, but the warmth of those memories felt hollow as their words poured through the screen. Lindsay only helps because she owes us. My mother's voice rang out sharp and dismissive. After everything we've done for her, covering the mortgage is the least she can do. Thomas, always the golden child, smirked. Yeah, and she acts like she's saving the family single-handedly. What a joke. But the part that hit the hardest wasn't their words. It was the silence from my father. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who stayed up late helping me with algebra homework, just sat there, nodding along, saying nothing. The video was shaky, recorded in secret, but every word cut like a knife. I played it again and again. 3 times until numbness settled over me like a second skin. For the past 4 years, I'd been paying the majority of their mortgage through my investment company, Investments LLC. They believed they were making payments to a traditional mortgage lender, blissfully unaware that the lender was me. Every month they paid their small portion and I covered the rest, all while they griped about how little I contributed. The video came with a message from my Uncle Jason, the only family member who ever truly had my back. I couldn't stay silent anymore, Lindsay. You needed to see this. They've been saying things like this for months. I sat at my desk, the spreadsheets open in front of me, line after line showing every payment I'd made, over $200,000 invested in keeping them in that house. My hands should have been shaking from anger, but they weren't. They were steady as I clicked through the mortgage agreement, and there it was, the purchase option clause. My financial advisor, Kate, had insisted we include it. Just in case, she'd said at the time. I remember laughing it off, convinced it was unnecessary. Now, I could have kissed her for her foresight. The next payment was due in 2 weeks. For the first time, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I texted Uncle Jason back. Thanks for showing me the truth. Don't worry, they'll never know it came from you, but everything's about to change. I had always been the family's safety net, though they'd never admit it. 4 years ago, when the housing market crashed and they were days away from foreclosure, they called me in tears, begging for help. I was 27 then, doing well as a software development manager. Ironically, they never approved of my career choice. Tech isn't a real career for a woman, my mother would say. Your brother has the real business sense. That business sense led Thomas to run my father's real estate company into the ground in under 2 years. And when they were drowning in debt, they didn't call him, they called me. Kate had been the one to suggest the LLC setup. It keeps you legally protected, she explained. You buy the house through Divine Investments and they think they're just dealing with a regular bank. It was the perfect solution. I could help them keep the house in the family and avoid their fragile pride. It worked seamlessly. They made their monthly contribution, I covered the rest, and they had no idea their daughter was the invisible safety net keeping their roof over their heads. Only Uncle Jason knew. He'd overheard a conversation between Kate and me at a family barbecue. You're too good to them, he said back then. They don't deserve you. I had defended them, of course. They've always given me a home, I said. I'm just paying it back. Now, watching the video for the 4th time, I realized I'd been deluding myself. She owes us, my mother's voice rang in my ears. What a joke! I logged into Divine Investments account, pulling up the next payment due date. They'd never missed a payment, they couldn't afford to, but this time I wouldn't be covering the gap. Let them figure it out, let them deal with the bank's notices, let them discover who they'd really been dealing with. My stomach clenched, but I felt something else too, a quiet sense of power. They had no idea their daughter, the worthless burden, was actually the one holding the deed to their house. Sometimes karma just needs a gentle shove. The next day, Uncle Jason sent more screenshots of a family group chat I wasn't in, one they'd apparently created 6 months ago. It was called Family Finances. Every message stung more than the last. Lindsay acts like her money's so precious, Thomas had written. She barely helps with the mortgage while I'm stuck running Dad's business every day. My mother's reply made my stomach churn. We should just tell her she has to contribute more. She's single, no husband, no kids. What else is she going to spend it on? After all the sacrifices we made to raise her, she owes us. I opened my financial tracking software and ran a report. $267,843. That's how much I'd poured into their house over 4 years. They'd contributed just $52,500. I barely noticed my phone buzzing, my mother's name flashing across the screen. Sweetie, can you come to dinner on Sunday? We have something important to talk about. I already knew what they wanted. More money, more guilt, more lectures about how I owed them for daring to be successful. I called Kate. What happens if they miss their next payment? Kate didn't sound surprised. Divine Investments can exercise the purchase option immediately. The house becomes your asset. They'd technically become tenants month to month. And if they miss rent, I asked, then you can evict them. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from something close to liberation. Years of being the dutiful daughter, the family wallet, the invisible lifeline, they were over. Do it, I said, but don't pull the trigger yet. Let's see how Sunday dinner goes. I texted my mum back. Of course, wouldn't miss it. The heart emoji felt both appropriate and cruel. The next mortgage payment was due in 13 days. For the first time, I wouldn't be there to catch them when they fell. Sunday dinner was an exercise in self-restraint. I arrived at the house, my house, right at 6 o'clock. The Arizona sunset washed the front porch in gold, and for a fleeting moment, I remembered being 16, sitting on those steps after prom, telling my parents about my scholarship. They hadn't cared much back then either. Lindsay, sweetheart. My mum's smile was all fake warmth as she pulled me into a hug. I noticed her new bracelet, probably bought with money meant for the mortgage. Thomas sat at the dining table, his phone in hand, looking smug. Hey, sis, he drawled. Good of you to finally make time for the family. I smiled back, matching his fake energy. I always have time for family. My father appeared, flipping through papers, bank statements. I nearly laughed. They were practicing their guilt trip pitch, rehearsing their "times are tough" monologue. Before dinner, my mother said, placing a tray of lasagna down. We need to talk about something important. Of course, I said sweetly, serving myself a slice. What's on your mind? Thomas cleared his throat dramatically. Well, you know how tough things have been at Dad's business. I smiled, my poker face firmly in place. They had no idea what was coming. I took a slow bite of lasagna, giving myself time to absorb the performance unfolding at the dinner table. The family business had been in trouble ever since Thomas took over, despite the Phoenix real estate market booming in recent years. Somehow, my parents still clung to the idea that their golden son was a business genius, while I was just a backup plan. We've been thinking, my mother said, reaching across the table to pat my hand, her touch light but deliberate. About how lucky we are to have such a successful daughter. Your father and I sacrificed so much to give you a good education. The sweetness in her voice was so artificial it made my teeth ache. Every word, every gesture was rehearsed and carefully placed, like props in a scene they'd performed before. The mortgage has become such a burden lately, my father chimed in, using that same paternal tone he'd always relied on to make me feel small. And since you're doing so well in... what is it again? Computer work? Software development, I corrected automatically. They'd only heard me say it 1,000 times. Right. He waved dismissively, the same way he always did. The point is, you could help a little more with the mortgage. It's still your family home too, after all. My family home. The house I'd quietly been paying for all along. We're only asking for an extra $2,000 a month, my mother added quickly, as though the number was insignificant. It's nothing for someone in your position. I took another slow bite, letting the silence stretch. They wanted $2,000 more on top of the $5,000 plus I was already paying every month without their knowledge. The sheer entitlement of it was almost funny. I'll think about it, I said mildly. Things are a little unpredictable at work right now. Thomas snorted. Unpredictable? Please. You make more than anyone here, and unlike some of us, you're not actually keeping a family business afloat. I smiled faintly, thinking about the foreclosure notice that would land in their mailbox in exactly 8 days. You're right, Thomas. Sometimes people get exactly what they deserve. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I wandered toward my father's study, drawn by the low murmur of voices. The door was slightly ajar, and curiosity got the better of me. She's not going to help, Thomas said bitterly. Did you see the way she just sat there? Acting like she's better than us with all her tech money while we're trying to save the family business. Patience, my father replied. We've got another option. Remember those investment documents I found in her cloud storage? Divine Investments? That's where she's hiding her money. My stomach twisted. They'd gone through my files the last time I visited. My own parents had snooped through my personal documents, probably when I carelessly connected to their Wi-Fi without thinking. She's been squirreling away money instead of helping us, my father continued. She's been hiding things from her own family. Then my mother's voice. We'll give her one more chance to help voluntarily. If she refuses, I'll remind her about that little loan she took from the business account for tuition back in college. She thought we didn't know, but we've always known. I almost laughed. That loan they were planning to hold over my head? It was money I'd borrowed with my father's permission after they bounced my tuition check. I paid it back with interest, in writing, but they were too busy rewriting history to remember the facts. And if that doesn't work, Thomas added casually, we could always contact her employer. Maybe mention she's been using company resources for personal projects. HR loves that kind of thing. My stomach turned cold. They were planning to sabotage my career, the career that had been propping up their entire lives. And they were smiling about it. I slipped silently back to the bathroom, flushed the toilet for show, and rejoined them at the table. When they returned moments later, their smiles were plastered back on, all sweetness and artificial warmth. Lindsay, sweetheart, my mother said, her tone syrupy. Have you had time to think about our little request? I met her eyes and smiled back, mirroring her fake warmth. Actually, I have. You'll have my answer in about 8 days. It was the exact number of days until their next mortgage payment was due, the first payment I wouldn't be covering. The day Divine Investments would formally remind them who really owned their beloved family home. Why so specific? Thomas asked, frowning. Just need to double check a few things with my financial advisor, I said smoothly. It's always good to be careful with money. You understand, Thomas? Good business sense and all." I saw the flicker of irritation in his eyes, but he forced a smile. My mother walked me to the door, pulling me into another forced hug. "We knew you'd understand, sweetheart. Family always comes first." "Yes," I said softly, "and family always gets exactly what they deserve." The drive home felt strangely freeing. I called Uncle Jason, who picked up on the first ring. "You were right," I said, "but don't worry, I'm done playing their game." "What are you going to do?" he asked cautiously. I smiled into the night. "It's time they find out exactly who's been paying for their comfortable life." The week crawled by, filled with a relentless stream of guilt-tripping texts and not-so-subtle reminders of their financial struggles. Each message only cemented my resolve. I forwarded everything to Kate, my financial advisor, who was already preparing the formal documents. "We're ready," Kate confirmed 3 days before the payment was due. "Once they miss the payment, we can immediately exercise the purchase option. We'll officially own the property and they'll become month-to-month tenants." "Is everything solid?" I asked, scrolling through years of receipts and legal documents. "Rock solid," Kate assured me. "Your father signed everything without reading it when we structured the deal. They won't have a legal leg to stand on." That night, Thomas texted, "Hey sis, just heard some tech companies are laying people off. Must be scary for you. Good thing you've got family to fall back on. Speaking of which, about that help." The manipulation was almost laughably transparent. I showed the text to Uncle Jason over coffee the next morning. "They've always been like this," he said. "It's why your aunt and I cut contact years ago." "Did you know they went through my files?" I asked quietly. "Not surprised. They did the same thing to your cousin when she stayed with them. They're always looking for leverage." "Not this time," I said. "This time they're out of moves." 2 days before the payment was due, my mother called. "Lindsay, honey, we really need to talk about the mortgage. Times are hard and family needs to stick together." "Don't worry, Mum," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "Everything will be clear very soon." That night, an email arrived from the bank. Their payment had bounced. They were already overdrawn. I forwarded it to Kate, who responded immediately. "Want me to move forward?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, remembering their words around the dinner table, remembering Thomas's smug smirk, remembering my mother's casual rewrite of my college years, and I smiled. "No," I replied. "Let them wait until the deadline passes. Let them spend the next 2 days thinking everything's fine." I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to my company's HR department, preemptively documenting my family's threats to sabotage my career. Evidence from Uncle Jason, screenshots of their group chat and recordings of the threats. Everything they thought they could hold over me was now my shield. Let them panic. Let them scramble. They taught me how to play this game. I just learned how to win. The payment deadline came and went without fanfare. At exactly 9 a.m., Divine Investments' automated system triggered its default notification, sending out the formal notice of non-payment and the immediate exercise of the purchase option. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, watching the seconds tick down until my phone rang. It took exactly 12 minutes. "Lindsay!" My mother's voice came through the line, high-pitched and frantic. "Something's wrong with our mortgage. The bank is saying we defaulted, but that doesn't make sense. We just sent the payment. We need you to come over right now and help us sort this out." I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the moment. "Actually, Mom," I said calmly, "Divine Investments isn't a bank. It's an LLC, my LLC." The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. "What?" she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Check your email, I continued. You'll find a formal notice explaining that since you've defaulted, Divine Investments is exercising its purchase option. The house is now legally mine. Effective immediately, you're no longer homeowners, you're month-to-month tenants. This, her voice faltered, this has to be some kind of joke. No joke, I said, my tone even. For the past 4 years, I've been covering the bulk of your mortgage payments, quietly keeping you in that house while you mocked me behind my back. I saw the video, Mum. Uncle Jason sent it. I saw every word you said about me. Her breath caught audibly. You don't understand. No, I understand perfectly, I interrupted. I understand that my own family, my parents, my brother, saw me not as a daughter or a sister, but as a walking ATM. I understand that you were perfectly happy to threaten my career, to blackmail me, to destroy me if it meant keeping the truth hidden. A shuffle on the other end told me the phone had been placed on speaker. My father's voice cut in, sharp and furious. You, ungrateful, careful, I said coldly. That's no way to talk to your new landlord. The eviction paperwork is already drafted, and I'm more than happy to have it served today if you keep pushing me. The stunned silence was delicious. We'll discuss your first month's rent soon, I added. You have 30 days to make the payment or vacate. I suggest you start looking for a new place, something a little more within your actual means. I hung up, blocked their numbers, and set my phone down with a satisfied sigh. Less than 5 minutes later, my inbox started to fill with emails from the usual suspects, distant relatives, old family friends, self-appointed peacekeepers. Every message carried the same tired theme. Family forgives, family sticks together, family always helps family. I deleted every single one without reading past the subject line. Some debts go beyond money, and some betrayals can't be erased with forced forgiveness. 3 months later, I stood alone in the now empty house. The furniture was gone, the walls stripped bare of photos, and the echoes of their voices had finally faded. My parents and Thomas had moved out the previous week, forced into a cramped rental apartment across town. They'd fought me at every step. Threats, tears, desperate legal challenges, but the documents were airtight. Their choices had finally caught up with them. Thomas's last-ditch effort to ruin my career, reporting me to my company's HR department, had backfired spectacularly. Thanks to the documentation I'd preemptively sent and the evidence Uncle Jason provided, his accusations were dismissed before they even gained traction. Worse for him, my company forwarded his attempt to the Arizona Real Estate Board, which triggered a formal ethics investigation into his business practices. His license was suspended within weeks, and his so-called career was effectively over. The final voicemail from my mother had come the night before they moved out. Her voice was thick with tears, shaking with both anger and desperation. "How could you do this to your own family?" she asked, as though she truly believed she was the victim in all of this. The answer was simple. I did it because they showed me exactly what family meant to them. They showed me with every cruel word, every entitled demand, every scheme they cooked up to take more while giving nothing. They showed me exactly how little I meant beyond my bank account, and I finally believed them. I walked through the house, tracing my fingers along the edges of the kitchen counter where they'd sat, mocking me over meals I'd paid for in a house I'd kept under their roof. The irony of it all felt poetic. Uncle Jason and his wife were coming over soon to help me get the house ready for sale. Not because I needed the money, far from it, but because I wanted to turn their betrayal into something worthwhile. The profits from the sale would become seed money for a foundation I was establishing, a fund to support victims of financial abuse, especially by family members. No one else deserved to feel the crushing weight of being exploited by the people they were supposed to trust most. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Kate. Just heard from their lawyer. They finally signed the last of the paperwork. It's officially over. It was over. I took a deep breath, looking around at the house one final time. It had once been the heart of my family, but now it was just an asset. A financial relic of a broken relationship. There was no sadness, no nostalgia, no longing, just peace. My parents always told me that family comes first. What they never specified was which family. This time I chose myself, and it felt exactly right.